My name is Melissa Salvin. I'm the Executive Director of Employer Relations and Operations for the Office of Career Success. We're really excited this morning to present session 1 of our Fast Track to a Public Accounting Internship virtual summer series, the goal of which is to get our rising sophomores ready for the very critical fall 2025 recruiting season. So thanks for joining us today. This is one of 5 sessions. And we will be recording this and posting it on iConnect for future reference if either you or any of your peers would like to access it. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us today Sean Wandrei, who is a senior lecturer in the accounting department, to talk about some public accounting essentials, including what is public accounting? How is that different from corporate accounting and other kinds? Should you apply for audit or tax? These are some choices you have to make. And what are the requirements to earn a CPA? So thank you all for joining us. I am going to hand it over to Sean. Thank you, Sean, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. So it's good to see everyone here. Like Melissa said, my name is Sean Wandrei. I teach taxes in the accounting department. I've been at Eisenberg now 13 years, which is nuts to think about. I worked in public accounting prior. I worked in both audit and tax. I worked regional firms in Western Mass and out in Boston. I'm originally from Western Mass area. I never worked Big Four, but being at UMass Big Four heavy, I've gotten to meet a lot of the firms and talk to them and get an understanding how that works. I'll actually touch upon a little bit between regional and Big Four along the way. But prior, like I said, I worked in public for 15, actually 17 years, and before coming to UMass, so I have some experience. And as we go through this, obviously, if you have questions, either raise your hand or just pop on the screen, and you'll see my contact information. I'm going to share my screen. And if you have any questions about anything during this, you can email me. All right. So hopefully you see the screen, the slideshow. Perfect. So here's my contact information, easy enough to find. If you have any questions going forward about any of these items or anything in accounting in general, because quite honestly, you're all new to this and you probably have a ton of questions. So we're here to help. Obviously, the Office of Career Success is here to help as well. And then the other faculty within the accounting department is here to help as well. So you can always reach out to them. So we're going to take a look at, like Melissa said, what public accounting, audit versus tax, and a CPA path. So as we walk through these 3 topics, I'm going to kind of touch on an overview of them all. I mean, this is not going to be something where you're going to have every information. It's going to be information overload, but it's going to give you some things that you should be aware of. We'll talk about what public versus private accounting is. Should you choose audit or tax? I mean, realistically, it's crazy that you're being met with these companies and you haven't even taken an audit class or a tax class. Maybe you've taken a tax class because my class is one of the earlier you take, but still to have an understanding like which path am I going to go. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And lastly, about becoming a CPA, what that entails. There's been some changes in those rules. So public accounting basically means that you're working for a firm that provides services to many clients. You're not an employee of that individual client. You're an external employee, and we'll touch upon that in a second. If you work in private accounting, it means you're working inside one company and you're handling the books, preparing financial statements that the public accountant later audits. So when you work for public accounting or for a public accounting firm, you are working for one specific firm, say one of the Big Four, one of the regional firms, but you're in a way performing a service for the public because that company prepared financial statements, and say if it's a publicly traded company, you want to be able to, as an investor or a banker, a lot of times for bankers, to be able to rely on those statements. So when you work for a public accounting firm, you generally work for a CPA firm, you're going to have multiple clients that you work on throughout the year. You're going to perform audits, maybe some tax prep, maybe some consulting. There's some limitations in that. And you're independent from those companies that you audit. So you're going to test, and we'll talk about what audit means in a second, but you're basically going to tell the public, hey, these financial statements that this company prepared, you can rely on them. So you can use them for banking decisions, or you can use them if you want to buy stock in that company. You can look at those financial statements and feel good that what they're telling you is accurate because they have been audited by a public accounting firm. We tend to be at UMass more public accounting focus because that's just where the jobs tend to be. But we also have private accounting. Private accounting, think is you work for this private company, like one of the big investment companies. You're preparing financial statements for that business that are going to ultimately get audited potentially. So you're preparing those financial statements that the public accounting firm would audit. You may do other internal reporting, other internal financial projects, whatever it is, maybe prepare budgets, prepare forecasts, things along those lines, but you're still doing accounting work. It's just you're preparing those statements that the public accounting firm would end up auditing. So there is a difference, and you can alternate between the two. And I'll talk about that in a second, but kind of give you an overview. Basically, if you work in public accounting, generally you're auditing and consulting with clients that are obviously you're independent from. Whereas if you work for private, you're preparing those financial statements that ultimately will get audited. You're working for that one company, that one investment company. What's good about public, and honestly, I think everyone should, and again, I'm going to be biased here because I'm a CPA. I worked in public accounting. I think everyone should get a CPA and work in public. Why? Because when you work in public accounting, you're going to work on a bunch of different companies. You're going to see how they operate, how internally they work. You're going to see like, wow, pharmaceuticals is really cool because I have these pharmaceutical clients. They're like, you know what, pharmaceuticals is cool, but I want nothing to do with it. And you're going to get to see how these businesses work. And then from there, a lot of times, and when the firm I worked for prior, when I was there, I can name a bunch of people that have left public accounting and went and worked in the private sector for maybe clients they actually audited because they got to know those businesses or they got to realize like, hey, I've been auditing this particular industry and I really like that industry and I have a bunch of stories from alumni. Same thing, like I like this industry, so I went into the biotech because out in Boston area, that's a big industry. So you have a lot of cool options. So that's why I think a lot of people should go into public because you kind of get that feel for all these different industries. All right, so now what do auditors do? They dig into the details and make sure everything checks out. They look at processes, transactions, balances to provide assurance that financial statements are accurate and reliable, kind of what I mentioned before. So they're an auditor, you're using logic, you're using evidence, you're using reasoning to conclude that these balances are correct. So a lot of times you'll test individual balances. So you may have accounts receivable and you're going to do examinations on the accounts receivable by testing those using different methods that you would learn in your auditing class to come up to the conclusion like, yep, these accounts receivable are reliable, or accounts payable, or you'll test the accrueds that the company prepared. So a lot of time you have these various techniques that you're examining the records. Does it make sense what they're telling me? Does it make sense looking at everything? Test wise, I'm going to test them. Does the test conclude to what the balances say? Cool, they do. Sometimes we may confirm directly with that independent or those the client we're auditing with their contract or their customers. Like, do you owe these people this amount of money? So we do various confirms. And at the end of the day, we also make sure that these financial statements are in compliance with GAAP. Because if you have public financial statements, generally they have to be in conformity with GAAP. And you'll learn about GAAP later. Generally accepted accounting principles. That's what GAAP stands for. So we have rules that everyone needs to follow. Why does everyone need to follow them? Because we want to compare and contrast statements. Like you're reporting on one way and I'm reporting on another way, and I'm trying to compare like which, if I want to invest in a company, which one's better? It's kind of tough where if we have conformity, we can make better decisions. So that's kind of what auditors do. They go into the companies and they audit their financial statements. So as you can see, you're doing a lot of work with these financial statements. So you're getting a good feel for what this company does. You're testing internal controls. You're examining their records. So that's why I say you get a good feel for how these different various businesses and potentially industries run. So you get a good knowledge. What's cool about auditing? Well, a lot of times you're going to expose to many different industries and companies, as I mentioned before. You work closely with the team and you often travel to client sites. It's a great way to learn about business functions behind the scene, kind of what I've been touching upon. So audit, you basically have an audit team. There's a group of you that will go to the client and you'll audit. Travel opportunities, while there are some, they have definitely slowed down with we're using Zoom right now, right? With a lot of remote work. travel opportunity. Like the first day I worked in public accounting, I got into the job not knowing anything. Like, hey, you got to go do an inventory observation. So I had to go travel to it, basically count inventory to make sure what the client said was correct. So there are opportunities. Like I said, they are not as many as there were in the past, but there's still opportunities. There are different types of audits. You could do internal audit. You could do IT, like audit computer systems, things along those lines. Again, what's cool, you can see about how businesses operate, which I've touched upon a bunch of times. And there is a busy season with all of accounting. There's busy season, but a lot of times it's predictable. I'm on this client. I'm scheduled for these days. I know when I'm going to be busy when I'm working on that client. So I can book vacation when I'm not busy. I know when I'm going to be busy. So I can kind of plan around that. It's not just like, I don't know, next week I could work 60 hours and then the week after I could work none. You kind of have a feel for where your schedule is going to be for the year. What's challenging about auditing? Well, can be tough, especially during busy season. You're going to be working a bunch of hours. You might have some repetitive work at first, and it's all but that's part of the learning process and the foundation for future responsibility. So we have deadlines. Deadlines need to be met. So sometimes you may be working and during busy season on audit, especially for a big four accounting firm, you might be working 60, 70 hours a week, which kind of like, oh, that sounds awful. But it's also you're working with your team. So in a way, you're commiserating with your team members. Like you're all working together. You're in this together. And maybe after you work, you go out and grab a bite to eat or a drink or something. So you're at least not in it on your own. Um, so the repetitive early task. So with AI coming around, a lot of that boring work that first years would do, which was great because it got them that learning expertise that they could carry on, but it was very boring. A lot of that work's being replaced now with AI. So you're coming in and not necessarily having to do that boring work, which is cool, but now the firms are coming up with different ways to get you ready for that next level to teach you. So while yes, there are some early repetitive tasks, a lot of that, and what's going to be interesting if you do accounting, is you're all going to be on the forefront for all this, how this is changing. So you may have a say, or you're going to see it firsthand. So that's really interesting, and I think it's cool. It's going to be exciting. Like I said, deadlines. There's always going to be deadlines in any industry you work on. There's deadlines because things don't get done if there's no deadlines. Documentation, well, I'm testing all this. I need to show that I tested this, how I tested it, provide documentation to show the testing I did, to provide documentation to make sure that their internal control procedures are as they say. And this one, because I'm a tax person, is feel like anyone like, oh, you're an accountant, you're a CPA, you can do my taxes, right? Well, generally, if you're in auditing, like when the firm I worked for, is I would do some of my audit friends' tax returns because like I have no desire for taxes. I don't know anything about taxes. So so yes, you will always seems like even when you're a CPA, like, oh, you can do taxes. Can you do my taxes? Like, no, I do audit. So I'm out of that. Any questions before we get into tax? All right. So that's kind of what we're looking at auditing. You're working for public firms. I mean, you're working generally if you're a public working for a public accounting firm, that's what you're doing. You're doing a lot of auditing. You're doing various clients. You're getting to see how they operate. On the tax side of things, tax accountants focus on making sure clients meet their tax obligations while paying as little tax as legally possible. You'll become an expert on rules and develop strategies for planning and compliance. So this is what I've done. When I worked in public, I did do audit in my early years, and I decided audit wasn't for me for a couple of reasons, and I got into tax. I like tax. I mean, tax basically equals I got to figure out rules. What's the legislation? How do I use those, research those? And it's interesting because they're always changing. So prepare tax returns. While yes, that is a part of your job, if you work for a big four firm, you're probably not preparing a ton of tax returns. We call that compliance work because you're complying with the laws. If you work for a regional firm, you might be doing more tax work because it's just the nature of the regional firms. You're doing tax work that for preparing tax returns for individuals for their businesses. Where big four, there's really there's no money in almost preparing that type of work. And they're not going to do that work because they're doing the higher level stuff. So some of the regionals might take that up, or you might even have tax preps like an H&R Block. And the reality of it was as AI continues to progress, some of this tax compliant work is going to be automated. But as far as accountants, it'll never automate us. It's just going to be another avenue, another way for us to use our skills. You're going to conduct research. So in the graduate level, I have a tax research class. What is that? Client comes to you and says, hey, I got this problem. I need you to answer it. Or I want to sell my business. What's the best way to structure that? And I would have clients call me like, hey, I got this question and blah, blah, blah. And I would like either A, I think the answer is this, but let me check to make sure, or I don't know the answer. And I would go research it and find the answer for the client. And some of it can be informal research where you're not preparing memos and letters. And then what we do in tax research in the graduate level is we perform research and then we communicate those through memos to the client and letters or memos to the inside the firm, clients to letters. So we're always trying to figure out the rules. And one of the reasons I like tax is here's the rules. All right, now how can I use those rules to pay as little tax as possible? Because that's the goal. I don't want to or need to or am obligated to pay more taxes than the law requires. So for my clients, for myself, friends, families, if they ask me, I want to try to figure out the best way to save on taxes. And that comes to advising and planning. So another reason I got into taxes, I worked with the business clients. And I would work with them and like, hey, if we set this structure up of this transaction, or if you do this by the end of the year, we can save tax dollars. And that's real money that they're saving. So auditors, again, audit is a great path. And I'm, again, biased. I'm a tax person. Auditors, I feel like when you go into the client, you're auditing their work. So are they happy to see you? I mean, yeah, they are because you're doing something that they need to be done, but you're also there like, hey, did you do this correctly? And you're testing their work where tax, I'm saving this business owner real money by sending a transaction up. So I feel like, hey, we're more buddies, but it's not totally that way, but that's kind of another reason I like to get into tax. And then lastly, ensure that we're compliant with the IRS rules, because at the end of the day, we need to be compliant with the IRS, because if not, we could face a lot of penalties and other interest or issues along the way. So what's cool about tax, I might have touched upon some of this, but if you enjoy analysis and logic, you're constantly learning from your work, has a big impact on clients. If you like puzzles and rules, tax might be your thing. So what's cool, tough about tax is it's changing. If you're paying attention now, there's this big tax bill going through, just went through the House. Now it's with the Senate and they're working on it. Well, these rules are going to impact you, maybe not right now, but down the road. But if you were working in public accounting, they're going to impact you. You need to understand them. How am I going to apply them to my clients? How am I going to make sure I am in compliance? So I got to solve these problems by these new set of rules, which can make it tough because they're changing the rules on me every year. Like, how am I supposed to keep up? Well, you just have to keep up. So it's good because you're always learning, you're always evolving. Tax, unlike audit, like when I worked in public, there'd be times I'd just be in my office preparing tax returns, doing work. But there are also other times I would go to the client and do tax work for that client. So there's not as much teamwork being on an audit team like you are for audit. With tax is a mix of a solo and teamwork. Like I said, constantly changing rules. It can be interesting. It can be tough. I need to stay up upon this. So I can't just rest on my laurels. I'm always learning, which is great because that's a good part. It makes your job more fun. So one thing is a lot of people like, I want to open my own firm. The best way to do it is to start off in tax, because everyone needs to file a tax return. Every business needs to file a tax return, needs tax planning. Whereas not everyone needs an audit. Not everyone needs a review, which is a different form of an audit, or not technically an audit, but a different form of reporting. You could add those down the road, but most people that I know that start their own practice are basically doing tax returns, doing accounting services, helping these small businesses. And if that's what you really want to do, is help small businesses, the best way to do that is through tax. And then down the road, if you want to get into something like audit, you could add that to your business. But generally, if you want to open your own firm, it's going to be starting on the tax side. And pay can be better because you are specialized in tax. I don't know how much, but I know it can be potentially better. So those are the cool things about tax. Now, obviously, there are some downsides, time pressures. Again, with any job, there's time pressures. So with tax, there is, if you ever heard of it, I'm sure you're aware of it, what we call busy season. It's basically from late January through April 15th, because that's the deadline to file tax returns for individuals. But corporations can also extend their tax return. Partnerships can extend. So you have another busy deadline on September 15th when extensions come due. And lastly, another busy deadline on October 15th when individual extensions. But again, those aren't as crazy as that period in the beginning of the year. So there is some time pressure. Obviously, clients want you to get their tax returns done. But the good thing is with that pressure, there's also downtime during the year. So you can get away during the downtimes, generally the summer months when it's not as busy. Code always is changing. You need to stay up on it. Long hours, again, goes in with that time pressure. Client demands, clients want their tax return done. They want to make sure they're compliant. They're concerned about that stuff. So they have demands. And like I said before, there might be less teamwork in tax, meaning you're doing some work on your own, which I did like the blend of both. I liked sometimes being in my office, turning music on and just cranking out some work. And it was also nice to get to a client, get out of the office. So I liked that mix of solo and teamwork. All right, so that's kind of where we're at with tax. Any questions? And again, I know audit because I've done it, but I'm in tax, I teach tax. So if you ever have any questions specifically about tax, I can help you with those. Also with audit though, I could help you with that as well, or put you in touch with someone. All right, so again, me being biased because I have a CPA and I think that all accountants should get one. It's not necessary, but CPA is more just than letters after your name. It's a symbol of expertise and professionalism. In public accounting, you usually need it to get promoted beyond the entry level, which is true. If you work in public accounting, you kind of hit this glass ceiling after, and I don't know now, it could be 3 to 5 years where you're basically not getting promoted. You're kind of stuck and you're going to end up kind of leaving the firm and moving on. The firms give you time to study for the exam. They give you financial rewards or bonuses for passing the exam. So they see how important it is. They put some time and money into making sure you get that. It opens doors. So a lot of times, if you have those CPA credentials, the person that you're dealing with knows that they spent the time getting the education requirements. They spent the time to study for the exam. They passed the exam. So they must know what they're doing because the exam is not the easiest thing to pass. So it does. And if you look at a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, I don't know the numbers, but I would assume if you look at many CFOs and people higher up in businesses, CPA is going to be represented well. And the other thing is, if you understand accounting, you understand business. Well, if you understand accounting, you have a CPA, or a CPA shows that you understand accounting. So you understand how businesses work, how the financial statements work, because you tested them back in the day. So they are, CPA is important in my book to have. Again, not necessary, but and I've worked with people who haven't had their CPA and they do well, but you're limited on sometimes where you can go without that CPA. So again, this is not a comprehensive, but it's just something for you to keep on your radar because I'm assuming most of you sound like potentially early in your college career that we need to keep an eye on this. And we have within the department, and we'll talk more about this during the fall and spring semester, like new majors nights and get into this in greater detail. But the CPA evolution in 2024 basically transformed the exam. It's still 4 parts, but what they did is they did a study like what do CPAs need to be successful in the world, and they came up with this new evolution that basically kicked off in full in 2024. So there's still 4 sections as there always been. There's FAR, which is financial accounting reporting, audit, which is audit and attestation, reg, which is tax and regulation, so taxes and like UCC law, different things like that, CPA law. And then the new thing is they added a discipline. So everyone has to take the first 3 parts, and then you get to decide, what is my discipline? I could do business analytics and reporting, that's BAR. I could do information systems and controls, that is IC or ISC, or I could do tax compliance and planning. So me, if I was interested in tax, I would probably go the tax route, but just because I have a TCP as my discipline doesn't mean I can't go work somewhere else, or it doesn't mean if you got the bar as your discipline, you and I still have the same licenses. I just decided to get a discipline in tax. You decided to get a discipline in business analytics, or someone else decided to get one in info systems. It's still the same license, and you're not pigeonholed into, oh, I got the tax discipline, I need to go do tax. It's just more like gives you as the tax exam taker, or sorry, the CPA exam taker, which discipline am I interested in? I want to go to that because you know what? I probably want to go into tax. Well, I should probably take the tax discipline. It gives me more exposure. Each section's 4 hours long. And you have to pass all 3 parts in 30 months, which is in an increase. It used to be 18 months. So what will happen is potentially you'll have an internship, you get a job offer, and say the job you work for will provide you with access to a program. You will use that to study to take the exam. You'll take the exam, ideally before you start working, maybe a little bit while you work, because you don't want to work accounting all day and then go home and study accounting. I mean, that's a lot of accounting. Ideally, you're going to have a lot of 2 to 3 parts done before you even start. And we'll get into that in later things, but it's totally possible to have that. That's not like, oh my God, you did all this. I mean, it's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it is totally doable. And you have 30 months. Once you pass that first section, the clock starts ticking. You have 30 months to pass those other 3 sections. All right. So what's required? So the 150 credit hours. I don't know how much in this part of your life you're paying attention to this, but this is in flux right now. There's multiple pathways to reach 150. The way it used to be is you could take 150 as an undergrad, meaning you could take your accounting classes, and then you almost had 30 credits you could take to minor in something. In theory, you could take it in anything. As long as you had to, of those 30 credits, there was 3 had to be in accounting. So if you were going to double major or minor in something, that might be a great way to do it. Get the 150 as an undergrad. I think the most effective way, again, being biased, but I also realize it has additional costs, is to get the master's in accounting. Because now you're going to get those additional classes in accounting that you couldn't get as an undergrad. So for instance, I teach tax. You could do a tax concentration. We could do tax research, partnership tax, state and local tax. Maybe like fraud and forensics. We have a fraud and forensics concentration. We take additional classes in fraud and forensics. Maybe data analytics is more what you like. We can do additional classes in data analytics. So we have those extra classes, kind of where you get that specialty. And we don't get numbers anymore, but it makes sense, is if you generally, the students that did the MSA passed the exam quicker than the students that did not do the MSA, which makes sense. You're getting more accounting classes, you're getting more knowledge within that accounting. So now the way they're looking at it is there's still the 150 requirement, but you might be able to obtain those additional 30 credits by working for a firm and taking classes within that firm and getting real working experience. So there's a combination of how you could get that additional 30. So obviously, I think the MSA is the best way to do it because you get additional accounting class. Obviously, there's additional cost with that. You can work the schedule where you get 150 and not have to pay much more, because you could load up on classes, and a lot of students do that. They'll load up, they'll maybe take 18 to 20 credits a semester and get those additional credits done. One thing to note, if you do the MSA, you can get it done in 4 years and the summer you graduate. So it's not like it's an additional time requirement. Each state has their own requirements, may make you take ethics. And I know for Massachusetts, once you get your license, you have to do every 2 years, you got to get 80 credits of hours of continuing education, and you have to do 4 hours of ethics every year. So there is ethics. But I would say at the end of the day, do some little research on your own. This way to the CPA.com pretty much has all the information you need to know about becoming a CPA, about testing, about state requirements, about just people's stories of how they did it, keeping you up to date on that 150 pathway. So that is the best way to keep up to date on the CPA exam. All right, so we got options, or you got options, I should say. And the best way to figure that out is to talk to people, take classes, During your internships, talk to anyone. Don't feel pressured like I got to go into public accounting or private. Everyone else is doing public Big Four. I got to do Big Four. So Big Four is the four largest firms, and we really have like another three firms that are pretty just a step below Big Four. I mean, you're working for the largest firms in the world. They're on campus wanting to recruit you, which is great. You're going to work more in specialized field. You're going to become a specialized person, individual in one area. So you're going to be tax. You're not going to do any audit work. You're going to have longer hours at your work, but your pay is going to be higher. Where regional firms are regional, they're in Springfield area or they're in Boston area, and that's kind of where they stay. They're in that region. You're going to see a wider range of businesses because while yes, you may be specialized, you're going to still see a little bit more of everything because the regional firms are smaller. They are working on some large clients, just not the Big Four level, like the international clients, but you could still work. Like when I worked for a firm in Western Mass, it was the largest firm in Western Mass. I worked on some big clients, got to see a lot of different things. If you work for a smaller firm, which is kind of cool, you might be able to see the whole audit all the way through instead of just working on one part of the audit. So I went through regional. I learned a lot through regionals. Obviously, Big Four is a big part of it. You learn a lot, you get a lot of experience. Just because you're in one doesn't mean you can't go back and forth. Generally, I will say though, is you see most people go from Big Four to regionals, not necessarily regionals up to Big Four. That's just the way it works. Audit and tax offer different pathways. What interests you? Are you a puzzle solver? You like rules and this and that? Maybe taxes. Are you more into examining and testing things out and working in teams? Maybe audit's what's good for you. And then lastly, CPA, something to think about. Like I said, having one, I think it is important to have one. I think it opens a lot of doors. If you don't have one, you still have a good career path in front of you. It just may be limited a little bit. And then lastly, take advantage of the resources on campus. You have Office of Career Success. The firms come back all the time to recruit. I can tell you what audit and tax is like, but we have alumni that come back that are in the middle of it. Why did you pick audit? Why did you pick tax? Do you like it? Are you happy? Why did you pick Big Four? Do you like it? Are you happy? Use these resources to help guide your decision because all of this, what happens if you get multiple job offers? How are you going to know? You got to you got to find some information. You have to go out there and ask because you want to make the best decision. And how do you do that? Gather information. So when people are on campus, talk to them, talk to some upperclassmen who have been through this process. Like, what was it like? What did you do? Things like that. Office of Career Success is going to be very helpful in helping you prepare for these interviews, getting everything in order, but they can't tell you do audit, do tax, do public, do not private, do regional, do Big Four. You got to kind of do some of that work on your own to get a feel for what is best for you. And the last thing I'll say is you may have an offer between two, three Big Four. Like, how do I pick? Well, you talk to people on campus. You get a feel like, I don't know, they're all great firms. Like, but you know what? This gut feeling makes me think I should go to this one because the people I talk to seem really cool. And I really someone, you know what, go to that firm because at the end of the day, you gathered that information. If that's what you feel is the best fit, then you go. And you know what? If it works, awesome. If not, you have other places to go, other firms to go. So you're not the last thing that the decision you make today is not going to pigeonhole you for the rest of your career. You do an audit internship, you're like, you know what? I don't really like audit. Talk to the firm. Maybe they can work with you to do something else. So a lot of it is gaining experience and figuring things out on your own, but it's also asking questions to help you get to that endpoint. And that's all I have for my presentation. I don't know if there's any questions from anyone. And like I said, if not, you can always reach out to me or to anyone in accounting or with specific accounting questions.
I have a question for you, Sean.
Yep.
You were talking about how students, a lot of times, after they work in public accounting for a little bit, they might go on to work in the industry with maybe one of the clients. So when students are trying to decide between different public accounting firms, is it a good idea for them to look at who those firms' clients are and see what industries they're,
Um,
drawn
yeah, I
towards?
guess that would be something to think about if you knew. So a lot of it, I think, is working. like if you knew what industry potentially you wanted to go to down the road, like I want to really get into pharmaceuticals or whatever. Okay, what firm has a large pharmaceutical client base? So that would be a good idea if that's something you knew. So yeah, I think if that was something down the road, like this could be a stepping stone for me to get into that industry, and this firm has a lot of those types of clients, then yeah, I would say it might be a good idea to try to get a job at that firm. I think a lot of times is you may not have any idea what you're interested in until you audit those clients. So if, to your point, you knew where you wanted to, I think, yeah, potentially targeting a specific firm that deals in that industry would be helpful, and it would be a good way, if that's your end goal is to get in that industry, would be a good way to get to it. So yeah, I never thought of that. So that is something to think about.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Right. Well, thank you all. Thanks for coming. I hope to see you in future classes. I teach individual tax in the undergrad, so if you're an accounting major, you have to take my class. I guess you could take it in the summer with a different professor, but most people will take it not in the summer. So I will see you then. And if you end up in the MSA, if you have an interest in tax, I would see you in the MSA as well.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you everyone for participating today.
Oh,
Just wanted to remind you that the next session of this series will be on Tuesday, July 8th, and that will be regarding the semester in the profession program, which we tend to call SIP. And that session will be led by senior accounting lecturer Kathy Lowry.
I would
So
say
thank
if
you.
you're interested in internship, SIP's a great way, and they're always looking for people. So I don't want to say you're guaranteed an internship, but you're got a very good opportunity to grab an internship through SIP.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.